great Stephan Livera.
Thank you, Vijay. That was an excellent, that was a great introduction. Thank you so much for speaking so kindly about what I've done. I am going to be talking a little bit about what you can do for Bitcoin. And so this is a common question that I often get asked, especially if I'm at Bitcoin conferences, at Bitcoin events. People are often asking these kinds of questions because there's a sense that we should be doing more, or that could they be doing more? And so I think it's important to reflect on a few points here, and hopefully everyone can now see the slides. Yep, okay, cool, we're there. So what you can do for Bitcoin. So first we're going to start with a little bit of a short GIF. So, are we just like this guy with Bitcoin? Like, is the train just moving and we think we're helping, but actually the train's just going on its own? Is that true? I don't know. Well, let's talk about it. So, first off, is there a point to trying to do something for Bitcoin? Or is it inevitable? Now, of course, some of the language people speak about online, people speak about it like, oh, look, it's this inevitable thing. You can't really stop this train. It's just going. But at the same time, could you say, if you did really believe it was inevitable, could you point to Bitcoin advocacy or building? Because people would just adopt it on their own. So in one sense, it's organic. Bitcoin adoption needs none of us. It's just going to happen. No one of us, let's be clear. But in another sense, Bitcoin in the aggregate actually relies on having people. Because people are the ones who build this system. People are the ones who develop it, who run this system. So what are some of the things that actually sustain the Bitcoin system? Well, there are developers. There are people doing code review. So there are people who contribute code, whether that is into Bitcoin Core or another Bitcoin implementation, or into software and applications that we use, whether that's your Bitcoin wallet on your phone, or whether it's hardware that we use to have, let's say, a hardware signing device to sign transactions. All of these things require work. All of these things require maintenance. It doesn't just happen for free. And so I think that's one of the messages I wanted to convey today, is that it doesn't come for free. It takes work. And so while we could have that debate about whether Bitcoin is inevitable or not, I think maybe it's not quite inevitable, but it's extremely high probability. But what makes it that is the people. And I think that's the important thing, that's the important point to convey, especially as you go on your own journey of learning about Bitcoin and doing stuff around the Bitcoin ecosystem, or trying to grow the base. We're trying to grow the pie here. So even when it comes to Bitcoin applications, even under supposed ossification, there's still maintenance required. There are still bug fixes required. All code has bugs, and even Bitcoin Core developers even have to keep doing work. They still have to review pull requests. They still have to fix bugs. They still have to do all these kinds of things to keep the system running. We in the Bitcoin system is reliant on growing the base of hodlers, Bitcoin stackers, sat stackers, whatever you want to call it. Bitcoin is reliant on miners who are securing the network and giving it those properties of being decentralized, scarce, open, robust, all of these things, making it accessible. Also, there's this notion of the narratives around Bitcoin, because if Bitcoin does not enjoy enough popular support, that could make it difficult for the system. Because if, let's say, it's illegal to mine in a certain country. Now, of course, even though there was the China ban of Bitcoin mining, there's still a considerable amount of hash rate coming out of China. And so, yes, Bitcoin, the system is built to be resilient, but it'll work a lot better if the system is open and encouraged by people. And so, while even again we talk about that idea of is Bitcoin inevitable, it still could impact Bitcoiners in different countries if Bitcoin is made illegal or very heavily regulated in such a way that it's difficult to hold it, to use it, to run your own Bitcoin node, to interact with the system in some way. So in one sense, this is a movement. There's no top-down leader. You don't need a blessing from anybody to get involved. And if you need it, I give you my blessing now. You can all get involved in Bitcoin. Take a, if somebody asks you, you can say, Stephan gave me his blessing. You can get involved in Bitcoin too. Nobody tells you what your role is. You go out there and pick it for yourself. You find something. And so my suggestion there for people who are interested is find a gap. Find something that is not already being done. And so that could mean you try to build a business that is helping people use their Lightning node. It could mean you see a gap in terms of code on how to, secure your coins or how to easily use multi-signature. Or maybe you're going to contribute by helping review some software. There are all kinds of ways that you can contribute, and we'll get into some of those. I think it's also important to point out that the Bitcoin ecosystem doesn't get the same kind of funding that other fiat institutions get, whether that's in the shitcoin land or in the non-quote-unquote crypto world. But that's not necessarily impossible hurdle, because people who are passionate, people who really believe in this thing, people who really see there's an issue with fiat currency and that Bitcoin is our answer, we can achieve things far more effectively even on a smaller budget. And we've seen examples of Bitcoiners do this. People like Nicolas Dorier, who went and created BTC Pay, who was frustrated with what was happening with BitPay. We've seen examples of Bitcoiners, for example, being frustrated with the way Bitcoin is portrayed in the media and basically going and creating their own media, their own outlets. We have Bitcoin Magazine. We have all kinds of other ways to get the message out and to get high quality information out about Bitcoin. So after you attend a high signal Bitcoin conference like BitBlockBoom, or where we've got Pacific Bitcoin coming up in November, that's organized by the Swan team, these Bitcoin only events, conferences, meetup groups, sometimes you can feel motivated. Okay, I want to be doing more. And then the question comes, well, what is there to take on? What ideas are there? What could you do? And the common idea here is people say, oh, look, I wish I could do more, but I'm not a developer, therefore, oh well, what can I do? That's not quite accurate. I mean, there are so many things you can get involved with that don't require you to even be a software developer. You could go and get involved in open source projects. So for example, if there's a Bitcoin wallet that you like, you could go in the chat room for that and give them feedback. So as an example, let's say you like Lightning and you like the Zeus wallet. It's an open source FOSS Lightning remote control for your Lightning node. And you can go in there and give them feedback, and they'll often take it on. So you can get involved in testing. You can get involved in review. You can get involved in helping translate. So if you're bilingual or multilingual, you might help with translation of some of these open source projects, or of translation of very important works. So for example, Vijay's excellent book, The Bullish Case for Bitcoin, has been translated into so many languages. So consider that also. You could contribute by translation. There are apps that need translation into other languages also. So these are just a few examples. You could invest in Bitcoin companies. So there are syndicates, investment syndicates, that allow you to invest in some of these Bitcoin companies. Now, of course, you always want to have a stack of Bitcoin to start with, and then think about, okay, how can I help raise the value of that stack or help contribute by growing this ecosystem? And that can be achieved by investing in the companies who are building out the vision that you would like to see. So if you want it to be easy to use Lightning, or if you want it to be easy to secure your coins, you can help direct that. So those are a few examples. You can work in a Bitcoin company. There's bitcoinerjobs.com. That's an example where there's a whole bunch of Bitcoin companies who have jobs there available. They're crying out for talent. So have a look, get involved. And in some cases, you can create your own job in this space. If you become an expert in something and your expertise is highly valued in the community, there's a good chance you'll get paid for it. You can start a project, and that project might be really valuable for people, and then some other Bitcoin company may see, hey, actually, there's a point for us to pay this person to keep doing what they're already doing. So that's a very common trend as well. If you can't code yourself, you could still fund a Bitcoin developer. There are organizations out there who enable this. So notably OpenSats, doing the Hodlonaut fundraiser as well. So certainly you can contribute in that way. You can also help grow your local Bitcoin community. Have you got a meetup in your area? If there is not already one, why don't you start one? If there already is a Bitcoin meetup there, why don't you go and get involved with organizing? Or perhaps you could say, hey, I'll do a presentation next week on whatever topic, how to be private with Bitcoin, how to run your Bitcoin node, how to do all of these aspects, because it helps grow the scene. It helps provide an easy onboarding avenue for new coiners, because they can just come to their local meetup and they can learn from somebody who's already spent that time going down the rabbit hole. And you'll find you'll learn a lot more too. So many people are involved, not just in Bitcoin. You know, there are things other than Bitcoin in some people's lives. I know it's hard to believe, but some people have, let's say, a career or some other profession that they can get involved in too, and helping those other people. So for example, you could have a professional organization that you can go and help orange pill them. And think about the case of MicroStrategy, because Michael Saylor had to first orange pill himself before he went to orange pill the rest of the company, or at least the key people involved, before they could be brought on board. It's the same with other companies. It's the same with associations and groups. You just have to start normalizing that idea amongst your peers, and then they may take that next step down the rabbit hole, let's say. So if you can get published in industry magazines, journals, newsletters, even the local newsletter, the local magazine, could you contribute in that way? So those are a few examples where you can help normalize this thing. You can start putting some of those ideas out there so that they feel more comfortable, and now they're ready to start stacking sats or start contributing. The other obvious pathways are to help onboard your family and friends. And they need help oftentimes, and I know many people have issues with this. Like, it's been, you're trying to get through to people, but you can't. You can't get through to them all. So you can be Uncle Jim for them. The proverbial Uncle Jim means let's say you're running a Bitcoin node and they are connecting to your Bitcoin node. So a quick example, you might be running the Electrum server, like Electras or Fulcrum, on your Umbrel or whatever other device, and you go to your family or friends and say, hey, why don't you run, as an example, Sparrow Wallet. So Sparrow Wallet can allow you to connect through to your own, so they can connect to your node. And then later, once they become a Bitcoin adult, they learn how to run their own Bitcoin node. And so the process repeats, and then they might tell some of their friends and family. And it's a process that grows in that way. And that's a big difference with Bitcoin, that there's really a strong community around it of people who believe in this thing, that they want an open and neutral ecosystem. You should hopefully coach them on non-custodial use of Bitcoin. That's one thing. You see people who are like doing these videos and it's all custodial, and it's like, come on. Like, if you can, try to do that in a non-custodial way. So with community and meetups, right? So as I was saying before, you can host, you can organize, you can present. I think some people get worried that they are not an expert and that they don't want to present. But what you'll find is if you go and present, you'll end up having to learn more in the process. So that's a common way that people end up learning more is actually having to teach. So that's useful. Supporting peer-to-peer. So are you helping to onboard family and friends? Like even if you have to sell them a small amount of Bitcoin just to get them started, are you helping in that way? Are you normalizing paying each other? Paying people back and forth, Bitcoin and Lightning? Especially useful in the international context because it's just a lot harder to make those payments. Another example is if you are helping teach local merchants. So here are some ways that you can help onboard local merchants in your area. So for example, Breeze has an inbuilt POS mode. So Breeze is a wallet, or it's an application and a platform that can help somebody take Lightning payments. And so if you have even a farmer's market, someone who's there, or a shop owner, and you're saying, hey, why don't we install Breeze on your phone right now, and you can take payments. And it's just like that. It's got a POS mode. It's got a little Excel import function that allows you to put in a bunch of products and prices for it. So they can ring it up on their little iPad or phone and take payment, just like that. Or if they need something that's a bit more larger level, they can go for things like OpenNode or Ebex Mercado. Ebex have a Lightning node solution also. Obviously, there's BTC Pay Server as well, so that's also a great option for non-custodial adoption. So in that way, you're helping grow the ecosystem, and it's decentralizing this thing in a way that's not kind of all centralized. So those are a few examples there. Let's talk a little bit about from bad to good to better, because as an example, would you rather somebody hold GBTC? I mean, I guess the steelman, on one side you could say, well, look, it's custodial, you can't even withdraw the coins. But on one hand, the steelman could be, well, hey, otherwise they're going to be holding government bonds. So isn't it better that they hold Bitcoin even in that form than in government bonds? I guess you could make that argument. Of course, then maybe the next level is, let's say they've got their coins on some exchange, but they're only using it custodially. And of course, as we always say in Bitcoin, not your keys, not your coins. So the next step is holding their own keys, but perhaps imperfectly. And so I think part of that is, as you help your family and friends, are you helping coach them down this pathway to progressively take them to levels where they are more sovereign? They are not having to rely on somebody else to use Bitcoin, interact with Bitcoin. So I think the point is, there are times when people come in less than perfect ways, but you have to. The point is that you're coaching them to improve. One other thing that maybe is a bit kind of challenging to think about is this idea that most of the coins already exist. So about 19.1 million coins of the 21 million have already been mined into existence. And yes, it's probably true that maybe 3 or 4 million of those coins have been lost. Now, how many people actually hold Bitcoin in the world today? Now, there are different numbers thrown around. People say 100 million, 200 million. But here's the on-chain data on that. So there are about 85 million UTXOs. Now, UTXO stands for unspent transaction output. You can think of it like a little hunk of Bitcoin. Like every time Bitcoin is spent, you're destroying and creating. It's kind of like melting and recasting gold. And so this is reasonably the upper bound for how many people actually hold some Bitcoin that is not an IOU. Now, even that number can be confusing too, because there might be some exchange who's got a few UTXOs that account for millions of customers. And on the other hand, there may be some users like us who have many, many UTXOs. Even if I'm only one user, I might be one user who has 200 UTXOs. But the point is, that's the upper bound. So on a planet where we have, let's say, under 8 billion people, the upper bound is 85 million people who hold some amount of Bitcoin that's not an IOU. That's where we are today. And probably a lot of those people, even if it was 85 million, a lot of them haven't really orange-pilled fully all the way. Maybe they just hold a little small amount or whatever. So that's where we are. That's how early we are, just to help convey that point. So what's the point of this? The point here is, it's not like new coins are going to be mined for the new people coming in. Most coins are held by somebody right now. So really what we're talking about is the process of new people who are coming in, but for that to happen, the price of Bitcoin has to go up high enough that the current holders want to sell some to them, right? So, you know, people talk about this idea, I guess colloquially, people might say, okay, how much money has gone into the stock market per se? But if you just put a box around it for one moment, you realize, wait a second, that money, it's not like the money balance changed if somebody was changing hands with stocks, because the same amount of money existed. It just it transferred from one person to another. What we're really talking about is the relative valuations of Bitcoin versus bonds, gold, property, stocks, etc. That's really what we're talking about. So at the end of the day, we have to build that base of hodlers, and only then will it really make sense for a lot of those people to actually transact directly in Bitcoin. Because right now, the base of people who even hold Bitcoin non-custodially is just that small. Like we said, it's 85 million at the max. That's, you know, just a tiny, not even, realistically, we're talking less than 1% of the globe. So the focus is to create new hodlers. That's really what it is. So I think the other point I wanted to make is that sometimes there's a bit of LARPing going on, right? Like everyone's kind of talking it up on Twitter or whatever and talking about how, yeah, see, it's going to kill the world or whatever. But there are a lot of people who haven't done the work. So that's really what it takes for us. What makes us different is that we are a community who rewards proof of work. There's no LARPing. LARPing means live action role playing. So it means improving our technical and economic knowledge. We're trying to spend the time doing that research, putting in the work so that people can really benefit from that by seeing, okay, this is the work that's been done. So we have to focus on truth, good analysis, using reason, data, and like that point I was making earlier, are we really about it? Are we using our own keys? Are we running our own Bitcoin nodes? Are we trying to decentralize further and use our own front ends? And we've seen examples of censorship happen. Are we ready for that kind of thing? Or how quickly could you spin up your own infrastructure? So, yep. So, I think the other point to consider is that you should try to be familiar with different Bitcoin products so that you can select the right tool for the job. Just with the time, is that inclusive of the...
5 minutes for questions.
Oh, we're into question time already. Okay, gotcha. All right, so let me just quickly zip through these last points. So basically, the point is that I think people should let's try to normalize Bitcoin payments amongst our friends and family. Success cases can look like this, where, you know, people are building up sats, and they eventually start DCAing and stacking on their own. One final point I just wanted to make is that it's like ideas and technologies. So Deirdre McCloskey in this book, Bourgeois Equality, talks about how the Industrial Revolution kicked off because certain ideas around dignity of trade and merchants became improved. Meaning, that unlocked such a massive gain. People previously were living on something like £2 per day. Now, let's say in Britain, as an example, they're living on £90 per day. So what is our big idea? It's obviously sound money. It's this idea of money that's free of government interference and money that's chosen by the market. So what kind of future improvements are possible if the world were to accept our big idea as opposed to this idea being criminalized or discouraged in a way, as an example, like not being able to access nuclear power or not being able to access even fossil fuel power. So those are kind of the key ideas. I hope that was useful for you. Go forth, my fellow train pushers. So we've got 3 minutes. So if anyone has any questions, there's a microphone just there.
I'll just second what VJ said about your podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, so I think that's pretty much it. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you in the Citadels.